Was Africa the lost continent theory? Welcome, family. Welcome to tonight's live stream. Atlantis was Africa, the lost continent theory. Before we dive in, make sure you've subscribed to my YouTube channel so you never miss these journeys into the ancient mind of Africa. Click the link in my bio and join the circle. Tonight, we're not just talking about a myth. We're questioning everything we've been told about where civilization began, and whether the lost world of Atlantis wasn't under the ocean, but hidden in plain sight in Africa. Let me know in the chat where you're watching from, and if you've ever heard the theory that Atlantis might actually be African. The myth of Atlantis revisited. Most of what we know about Atlantis comes from Plato, a civilization of great knowledge, spiritual power, and advanced technology that sank beneath the waves in a single day and night. But what if Plato wasn't describing a fantasy, but retelling an ancient African story? Egyptian priests were his source. They told him about a land that once ruled across the sea, rich in gold, wisdom, and divine order. A civilization destroyed not by nature, but by imbalance, by forgetting the laws of Maat. Type Maat in the chat if you believe balance is the key to survival, even for civilizations. The Eye of the Sahara. The Richat Structure. Now let's journey to Mauritania, deep in the Sahara Desert. There lies a massive circular formation known as the Eye of the Sahara, or the Richat Structure. It's a geological marvel, nearly identical to Plato's description of Atlantis, concentric rings of land and water about 23 kilometers wide. Satellite images reveal something incredible. Traces of ancient riverbeds, marine fossils, and what appears to be an ancient shoreline. Could this once have been submerged or struck by a cataclysmic flood? Some researchers even claim magnetic anomalies in the region suggest extreme heat, the kind caused by massive lightning storms or energy surges. Do you think Atlantis could have been in the Sahara? Yes or no? Drop your answer in the chat. The Great Flood and African Memory. Across Africa, flood stories echo like memories, from the Yoruba to the Dogon, from Kemet to the Congo. In Yoruba oral history, the world was once covered in water. Olokun, the spirit of the deep, ruled the flood until the Orisha Obatala created land. The Dogon speak of celestial beings who descended after a great flood, bringing knowledge of the stars. These aren't random myths, they are memory. Spiritual archives of real events that reshaped the earth. The lost rivers of the Sahara. Did you know the Sahara wasn't always a desert? Satellite scans show massive dried riverbeds, ancient lakes, and even fossilized fish. This region once flourished, with lakes the size of small seas. Civilizations may have risen and fallen there long before Egypt's pyramids touched the sky. Climate change, floods, or celestial impact. Something turned paradise into desert. Kemet, Atlantis, and the Sea Kings. The Egyptians always spoke of their ancestors, the followers of Horus, who came from the west. If Atlantis was in West Africa, then Egypt could have been its eastern heir. Notice the advanced maritime knowledge in both cultures: navigation, sacred geometry, and knowledge of the stars. Ancient Nubian and Egyptian art even depict reed boats identical to those used by West African civilizations, suggesting an ancient oceanic link. Yoruba, Dogon, and the science of the ancients. Let's go deeper into the Yoruba and Dogon mysteries. The Dogon people of Mali describe the Sirius star system with precision only modern telescopes can confirm, knowledge they say came from beings called the Nomo after a flood. Yoruba cosmology describes creation as ordered through vibration and elements, the same idea behind Atlantean myth, a civilization guided by both science and spirit. Could Atlantis have been a high civilization of frequency, energy, and balance, much like the African empires that followed? Hidden evidence and suppressed knowledge. Why does mainstream archaeology avoid this conversation? Because it rewrites the map of human history. If Africa is the birthplace of humanity, why not also the birthplace of Atlantis? Every stone, every myth, every riverbed whispers that something greater once stood here. The return of memory. Atlantis might not be a place, but a memory in our DNA, of balance lost and wisdom forgotten. As Africa rises again in consciousness, we begin to remember what was buried, that we are the descendants of those who built, who sailed, who balanced heaven and earth. The lost kingdoms of the Western Sahara. Family. If Atlantis truly existed on African soil, then its echoes must still live among us, not in the ocean floor, but in the sands of the Sahara. Long before the Mali Empire, before Ghana, before the kingdoms we learn about in colonial textbooks, there were older cities, vast cities, buried beneath dunes and silence. Historians speak of the empire of Ouagadougou, the first Ghana. But the griots, the keepers of memory, tell a deeper story. They say Ouagadougou was a golden city, rich in wisdom and balance. But when greed entered the hearts of men, the city sank, swallowed by the earth just like Atlantis. Sound familiar? A kingdom destroyed not by water, but by imbalance, by breaking the law of Maat. And where was Ouagadougou? Right along the edge of Mauritania, near the very same region where the eye of the Sahara sleeps. It's almost as if the ancestors are whispering that the myth of Atlantis never left Africa. It just took on new names: Ghana, Mali, Songhai, each one carrying a piece of the old light. DNA, migration, and the science of remembrance. Now let's move from legend to science, because even in our DNA, Africa's story is still speaking. Modern genetics shows us something incredible. Every living human being carries the mark of a mother from Africa. The oldest mitochondrial DNA lineages come from here, specifically from the regions around the Sahara. When the great drying of the Sahara began, our ancestors didn't vanish. They migrated to the Nile, to West Africa, across the Red Sea. They carried memory, art, language, symbols, fragments of that ancient light. You see, the migration was not just physical, it was spiritual. The fall of Atlantis wasn't just a flood of water, it was a flood of forgetfulness. And yet the code of who we were, the builders, the dreamers, the scientists, survived inside us. Science is only now catching up to what our ancestors encoded in myth. The story of the Great Flood is not just history, it's heredity. Every drumbeat, every spiral carved into stone, every rhythm in our DNA. It's all Africa remembering herself. The symbols of Atlantis in African art. Now let's talk about something visual. The art, the patterns, the language of symbols. If you look closely at African carvings, pottery, temple walls, you'll find repeating symbols: spirals, concentric circles, the sun disk, serpents, triangles. These same symbols appear in Plato's description of Atlantis, the circular city surrounded by rings of land and water. But we see those same forms in African architecture, from Nok to Nubia to Ife. Family. These are not coincidences. Symbols are memory devices, and art is the language of the soul. Our ancestors encoded cosmic truths into design. The spiral represents expansion. The circle represents eternity. The serpent represents transformation and energy. So when we see these in ancient African temples, we are not looking at decoration. We are looking at philosophy, science, and spirituality all in one. The blueprint of a forgotten civilization still living through our creativity. The fall, when Africa forgot herself. But family, every light has a shadow. The fall of Atlantis, the fall of Africa, wasn't only caused by flood or disaster. It was caused by forgetfulness. When the balance of Maat was broken, when we began to chase gold instead of wisdom, when we turned our science into power instead of harmony, the flood came. The spiritual flood. We forgot that we were the children of light. We forgot that knowledge was sacred, not something to be sold or conquered. Colonization didn't start with ships. It started when the soul was colonized. When we forgot that everything outside of us was born inside of us first. Atlantis didn't sink beneath the sea. It sank beneath time, and it's been waiting for us to remember. The return of Atlantis, awakening the African memory. But tonight, as we speak these words, something ancient stirs. The return of Atlantis isn't about a city rising out of the water. It's about consciousness rising out of sleep. Africa is awakening again. The youth are searching for truth. The ancestors are whispering through dreams, art, and rhythm. Every time you seek truth, you raise the city. Every time you choose balance, you rebuild its temple. The return of Atlantis is the return of remembrance. Close your eyes for a moment, family. Picture the golden city beneath the sand. Feel the vibration of the drums calling it back. The waters are pulling back, revealing not ruins, but you, because maybe you are the descendant of the builders. The water that remembers. Let's talk about water, because water, family, is not just a substance. It's a living archive. Modern science tells us that water holds memory. It can store vibration, sound, and intention. Now imagine the floods that swept across the Sahara thousands of years ago, carrying not just soil and sand, but the memory of civilizations. Maybe the waters that covered Atlantis weren't a punishment. Maybe they were preservation. Maybe they stored what we were, waiting for a time when humanity was ready to remember. When we speak, when we sing, when we pour libation, we're not performing a ritual for the past. We're reactivating ancient data. The water responds. The ancestors respond. So when the Nile flows, when rain touches African soil, maybe it's Atlantis whispering back. African prophecies of the return. Now here's something few talk about. The prophecies of return. In Dogon tradition, there's a story of the Nomo, beings of light who came from the waters, taught humanity the science of balance, and promised to return when the stars realigned. In Zulu teachings, the great sage Credo Mutwa spoke of the first people, those who mastered energy and built the great cities before the stars fell. And in Ethiopia, there are ancient texts that speak of the age of remembering, when lost wisdom would rise again through the children of the sun. These aren't random prophecies, they are timelines. They tell us that cycles of awakening are real, and we are living in one right now. This isn't about superstition, it's about synchronization. The ancestors said, when Africa remembers, the world will heal. Maybe that's what Atlantis was really about, not a place, but a frequency. Ancient energy, grids, and ley lines. Let's shift to something physical but mystical, energy grids. Have you ever noticed that ancient sacred sites? From Egypt's pyramids to Great Zimbabwe to Mali's megaliths, all line up perfectly with magnetic points on Earth? Modern scientists call them ley lines, but our ancestors called them dragon lines, serpent paths, or veins of the Mother Earth. The temples, the pyramids, the shrines, they were placed with geometric precision to balance the planet's energy. And guess what? The eye of the Sahara sits right on one of these energetic intersections. Some call it coincidence. I call it design. If Atlantis was African, then maybe its energy grid powered not just machines, but consciousness itself. Spiritual technology and vibration. Let's talk about spiritual technology, the kind that doesn't plug into walls, but into the soul. In Egypt and Nubia, sound was science. The temples were tuned to frequencies that could heal the body and elevate the mind. Even in West Africa, blacksmiths and griots used drums, chants, and metals not just as art, but as energy conductors. That's ancient technology. The vibration of a drum isn't just music, it's data. It carries ancestral code just like the humming of a power line. So what if Atlantis wasn't about machines or electricity at all? What if it was a civilization that mastered frequency, the science of sound, soul, and resonance? The real power wasn't outside of them, it was inside. And that's the technology we're rediscovering right now. Modern evidence and missing history. Let's anchor all this in what's being found today. Satellite scans across the Sahara have revealed massive riverbeds, buried walls, and rectangular patterns, signs of cities beneath the sand. Archaeologists rarely speak about it publicly, but the data exists. Massive underwater ruins near West Africa. Pyramidal shapes off the coast of Senegal. It's as if an entire map is re-emerging. A map that says, this continent has always been the center. So when people ask, where is Atlantis? I say, look at Africa. Look at what was buried and what's being reborn. The prophecy of the returning sun. In the temples of Kemet, there's an inscription. When the sun returns from the west, the world will be reborn. Family, do you realize what that means? The sun, the knowledge, returning to the west, to the diaspora, to the children scattered across oceans. You are that returning sun. When you seek truth, when you reclaim your story, when you awaken your light, you fulfill that prophecy. Atlantis was never lost, it simply became you. The sound of creation. Every ancient African creation story begins with sound. The Dogon say the universe began with a vibration, a word. The Egyptians called it the utterance of Ptah. The Zulu spoke of the voice of Unkulunkulu. Before there was light, there was sound, and that sound created form. Now, here's where it connects. The pyramids, the temples, the megaliths, all of them amplify sound. Maybe they weren't just symbols of power, they were instruments. And those who understood the sound of creation could shape matter itself. Atlantis wasn't destroyed by arrogance. It was silenced. And now the sound is rising again. The Mirror Empire. Theory. Let's explore one of the boldest theories. The Mirror Empire. What if Atlantis wasn't just in one location, but mirrored across the Earth? From Kemet to Mesoamerica, from Zimbabwe to the Pacific. Ancient maps, symbols, and architecture reveal eerie similarities. Pyramids, serpent worship, flood legends, and sun cults. Maybe they weren't copying each other. Maybe they were connected. A single global civilization with Africa as its heart. That would mean history didn't start in one place and spread. It pulsed outward like light. The ancients didn't just explore the world, they reflected it. The technology of spirit. We keep calling these ideas myth because we can't measure them with modern tools. But what if the ancients used spiritual technology, tools of energy, frequency, and consciousness that modern science hasn't caught up to? They could move stone with resonance, heal with light, and travel through dimensions using sound. To them, science and spirit weren't opposites. They were one language. Atlantis didn't vanish. It ascended, and we're just beginning to remember the equation. The Stargate of the desert. Hidden in the Sahara, satellite scans show circular formations, massive corridors, and geometric patterns buried beneath miles of sand. What if those weren't natural? What if they were remnants of something interstellar, a stargate, or a communication grid? Egyptian texts speak of portals of light. Dogon elders speak of beings who traveled between Sirius and Earth. If Atlantis existed in Africa, maybe it wasn't just a city, maybe it was a gateway. And the frequency of that gateway might still echo beneath the dunes. The fire and the forgetting. Every great civilization has its fall. But what if Atlantis didn't fall by disaster, but by design? Some say the priests of light knew a great flood or war was coming, and they chose to hide the knowledge, sealing it in temples, crystals, and DNA. They encoded wisdom into myths, songs, and symbols, knowing only those with awakened consciousness could decode it later. So maybe history wasn't lost. It was hidden. Maybe the forgetting was part of the plan. Because only when humanity matured enough to wield that wisdom again could Atlantis truly rise, not from the sea, but from within. The children of the blue light. Across Africa, many tribes speak of a race of beings, luminous, wise, and compassionate, who came from the stars or from beneath the waters. The Dogon call them Nomo. The Yoruba speak of the Orisha who descended through the sky. The Egyptians called them the Netjeru, divine beings of energy. They taught humans agriculture, mathematics, language, and balance with nature. Sound familiar? It's the same story Plato heard from Egyptian priests of the story of Atlantis. So maybe Atlantis wasn't destroyed. It transformed. The light didn't die. It reincarnated in us. The new Atlantis prophecy. Let's end with this. What if the new Atlantis isn't a place, but a frequency of consciousness returning through Africa and her diaspora? The knowledge of vibration, balance, sacred science, it's being reborn through our music, art, technology, and spiritual awakening. We are the continuation of that legacy, the keepers of the codes. The ancients built with stone. We build with information. They mastered sound. We master frequency. The story is repeating, but this time it's conscious. So the question isn't, where is Atlantis? It's, when will you remember you are Atlantis? The ancient maps that shouldn't exist. Let's talk about the maps they don't want you to look too closely at. The Peary race map, drawn in 1513, shows Antarctica ice-free. It also shows Africa's west coast in perfect proportion long before satellites. How could ancient mapmakers have known the true shape of continents beneath the ice? Because those maps were copies of much older ones. Atlantean cartography. Knowledge preserved from a civilization that surveyed the Earth with geometry and stars, not ships and compasses. That's why Africa appears at the center of so many of these maps, because once it was the center of the known world. Water, the living memory of Earth. In every Atlantean legend, water isn't just a symbol of destruction, it's a symbol of memory. Science tells us water holds frequency. It can record vibration, emotion, even words. So what happens when an entire civilization falls beneath the sea? Its vibration doesn't die. It merges with the ocean itself. Maybe that's why people feel called to water, oceans, rivers, lakes. Because somewhere, deep in our cells, we remember. The flood didn't just drown a city. It encoded a message in the planet's bloodstream. DNA, the library of Atlantis. They say knowledge was lost. But what if it wasn't lost at all? What if it was stored in the most advanced vessel imaginable, the human body? Our DNA isn't just biological and it's informational. It's memory. Ancient African spiritual systems taught that the blood carries spirit. That means the legacy of Atlantis lives in us, encoded in our cells, waiting for reactivation. That's why certain frequencies, music, or rituals feel familiar. They awaken ancestral memory. We don't need to find Atlantis. We need to remember it. The stars above Kemet. Every major African temple is aligned with the stars. From Giza to Nabta Playa, from Axum to Great Zimbabwe. The ancients weren't worshipping stars. They were communicating with them. They saw the sky as a reflection of Earth, the principle of as above, so below. When the Orion belt rises, it aligns perfectly with the pyramids, the gateway of Osiris. The souls return to the stars. Atlantis wasn't just a place, it was a map between heaven and earth. And that map is still written in the constellations above Africa. The science of crystals and light. Have you ever wondered why so many ancient African sites are built on quartz bedrock? Quartz amplifies energy. It's the same crystal used in watches and technology today because it vibrates consistently. So when temples, pyramids, and obelisks were placed over these crystal grids, they became living circuits. They could store, transmit, and balance energy, natural Wi-Fi long before electricity. The ancients knew how to talk to the planet. They weren't primitive. They were advanced in a way we're only beginning to understand. The balance of Maat. Kemet didn't just teach science, it taught balance. Maat wasn't just a goddess. She was the principle of truth, justice, and cosmic equilibrium. When the Atlanteans fell, it wasn't because they lacked technology. It was because they lost balance. Power without harmony leads to collapse. Knowledge without humility leads to destruction. Africa's wisdom reminds us, the key isn't in power but in balance. That's the law of Maat. That's how civilizations rise and fall. The hidden energy grid of Africa. From Mali to Egypt, from Zimbabwe to Sudan, there's a mysterious alignment of ancient sites. They form a straight line, almost magnetic, like nodes on an energy grid. Each site vibrates at a similar frequency, connected through the Earth's electromagnetic field. It's as if Africa itself is a power circuit, and the ancient temples were transformers of planetary energy. That's why the ancients said the land was alive, because it truly was. The return of the Golden Age. Many prophecies, from the Dogon to Kemet to ancient Ethiopia, speak of a time when the wisdom of the ancients will return. They called it Zep Tepi, the first time, when humanity lived in harmony with the cosmos. That age isn't behind us, it's coming back. We're entering the next cycle, the rebirth of Atlantis, the rebirth of divine science, the rebirth of truth. And it's starting where it all began, in Africa. The moon and the mothers. Here's something powerful. Across ancient Africa, the moon was seen as the mother of the waters, the keeper of rhythm. The priestesses of Atlantis were said to govern tides, fertility, and balance through lunar energy. When the flood came, they carried their teachings to the Nile and beyond. Even today, women across the continent carry that lunar wisdom in ritual, song, and intuition. Atlantis wasn't just a kingdom, it was a matriarchy of light. And that light is rising again. The message of the ancestors. The ancestors are not gone. They're in our breath, our rhythm, our heartbeat. They whisper through dreams, numbers, synchronicities. They're guiding us back to the truth, that Atlantis was not a lost world, but the origin of the world we live in. When you feel that chill during meditation or that pulse of déjà vu, that's them. It's remembrance. They're saying, wake up. The time of remembering is now. The sacred geometry of the continent. Look closely at Africa's shape. It's not random. It mirrors the ancient symbol of the human body. Kemet was placed at the head. The Congo Basin, the heart. South Africa, the root. The Nile? It's the spine of the continent, channeling life force just like Kundalini energy. The ancients built temples along this current, each one a chakra point, activating the Earth's body. Atlantis wasn't a city. It was a living organism, a planetary consciousness. And Africa was its beating heart, the lost science of sound and vibration. They tell us pyramids were tombs, but listen carefully, not just look. Inside those stone chambers, frequencies resonate perfectly at 432 Hertz, the vibration of natural harmony. Ancient Africans didn't just study sound, they used it to move matter, to levitate stones, to heal the body. Every drumbeat, every chant, every song was a form of technology, tuning human energy to cosmic frequency. That's the real science of Atlantis. Vibration is creation. Energy temples and stargates. What if those ancient temples weren't temples at all, but machines? The Great Pyramid, aligned with true north. The temples of Axum, each oriented to Sirius. Great Zimbabwe, a perfect resonator. They functioned like antennas, pulling down energy from the cosmos, channeling it into Earth's grid. This is what the ancients meant by the gods walking among men. They harnessed natural power and merged it with spirit. That was the Atlantean legacy, divine technology in human hands. When stars spoke to Earth. The Dogon people of Mali still speak of a star called Sirius B, invisible to the naked eye, only confirmed by science in the 20th century. They knew its orbit, its density, its light pattern. But how? Because their ancestors didn't just study the stars, they came from them. In their stories, the Nomo descended from Sirius to restore order after a great flood. Atlantis, flood Sirius. The pattern repeats, the knowledge always returns. The fire and the forge. Africa's metallic memory. From the Dogon to Benin, blacksmiths were more than craftsmen. They were priests. They worked with fire not just to shape metal, but to channel spirit. Every spark was sacred, every hammer strike echoed creation. That's why iron and gold appear in so many African myths, not for wealth, but for transformation. Atlantis didn't fall because they lacked science. It fell because they forgot the sacred side of it. Time, the lost dimension. We think of time as linear, past, present, future. But ancient Africans didn't. To them, time was circular, an eternal return, not a straight line. That's why prophecies from thousands of years ago still resonate, because the cycle is repeating. Atlantis isn't a past event. It's a recurring vibration, and it's returning through consciousness. Right now, we're living in the echo of the first civilization, the prophecy of the return. Many ancient texts, from the Book of the Coming Forth by Day to Ethiopian scrolls, speak of a time when truth buried in sand will rise again. They said, "The gods will return as those who remember." That means it's not deities coming back, it's us. We are the returners, the descendants of light, awakening to what we've always been. And as we awaken, so does the earth. The vibration rises, the memory activates. Atlantis lives again, through consciousness. The science of spirit. Why this matters now. So why does this matter? Why talk about Atlantis, Africa, and the ancients in 2025? Because history wasn't lost, it was hidden. And when a people forget their beginning, they forget their power. This isn't just about the past. It's about reclaiming the knowledge that can heal our planet. Energy balance, sacred geometry, divine order. The ancients left us blueprints for free energy, sound healing, balance with nature. And the time has come to bring that science back. With wisdom, not ego. If you felt drawn to this message, it's not by accident. Maybe you've dreamed of golden cities, of shining water, of stars speaking in light, because your soul remembers. Atlantis wasn't lost. It's inside you. Africa is not just the birthplace of humanity. It's the birthplace of memory, energy, and divine intelligence. And tonight, we've just reopened that door. So when you look at the stars, or listen to the ocean, or feel the pulse of a drum, remember, you're hearing echoes of Atlantis, echoes of yourself. Thank you all for being here tonight, for remembering with me. Make sure you're subscribed to my YouTube channel so you don't miss the next live stream, where we'll go even deeper into the ancient science of sound, power, and the soul. Until next time, stay curious, stay awakened, and as always, stay balanced in Maat. Good night and stay blessed. Atlantis. Was Africa the lost continent theory? Welcome, family. Welcome to tonight's live stream. Atlantis was Africa, the lost continent theory. Before we dive in, make sure you've subscribed to my YouTube channel so you never miss these journeys into the ancient mind of Africa.